Tools are a big deal to me. Tools are a big deal to anybody that works because, we just got to have them. I made a video about 7 years ago, I think, of my top 10 favorite tools, the ones that I love, the ones that I use, the ones that have made me the most money. And today I would like to do a little clip about the top 10 tool modifications that I've made. Because if you use a tool for any period of time at all, it is likely that you're going to think of a way to sort of tweak that tool, sharpen that tool, change the shape, change the application, I don't know, whatever it would be that you would do to a tool that you use as a modification. Now, some of these modifications that I'm going to show you are everywhere. Those of you in construction are going to recognize some of these. Those of you who are blacksmiths or loggers are going to recognize some of these, but some of them, I think, are uncommon, and some of them are profoundly helpful. Let me show you some of the ideas that I stole and some of the ideas that I came up with on my own. Let's start with the firmer's chisel. I've learned that this is what this is called. When I got it at a garage sale in Wyoming in 1982, it had been abused and hammered down with no wood handle at all and just a socket that was completely upset and folded over and wrecked. So I welded a new socket on there, extended that long enough to put a good sturdy handle in there, which this one, by the way, was made by Ken Jordan. And now it's become a combination between a super sharp, super long, really wide chisel for getting into remote spaces, that's what they were made for, and a pry bar. This will work when you're putting down deck board. You can drive it into the edge of the joist and then pry against the boards to force out a bow or squeeze it up against spacers, which is the next tool modification that I intend to show you. Building decks, it's always a question about how much space you put between your deck boards. I mean, is it 1/8 of an inch? Do you use a 16-penny sinker? Or do you use your carpenter's pencil? Or if you got a lot of leaves and you want it 1/2 inch, and how do you make it regular? Well, one day, I had that idea. And so I got busy and welded up a set. This is, I think, the second set. I lost one set. I can drop these in between the deck boards and keep a nice even 1/4 inch space and then pull them out. And not only that, but I can rack up 4 or 5 deck boards at once and use my firmer's chisel to squeeze over against all of these spacers and have nice, even, tight reveals, which will increase over time when the boards dry out and shrink, but at least you know they started right. I made a couple other thicknesses. 3/8, I've never used them. 5/16, I used once. But in general, a set of 1/4 inch deck spacers is a mighty handy thing to have. Everybody's got a tape measure because everybody needs to measure. And I did a video one time on the advantages of a Spencer automatic rewind logging tape, and they are the way to go for layout. But then you get to the question of, how am I going to make this hold 80 or 90 feet away on a concrete stake? Or if you're logging, you may already know this, how am I going to make this hold 20 or 30, 40 feet away, stuck into the end of a log? Now, any of you who have spent any time at all in the brush know that you just take a horseshoe nail and bend it over and stick it in the bark. But those of you who are doing construction layout may have been sort of frustrated by having to have this hung on the end of something that it's always going to slip off of. When you're doing rough layout, that is plus or minus 1 inch or 2 is fine. What I do is this. I cut a little piece of string, Mason's line, which I've always got, and I stick it through the hole in the end of the tape, and I do a girth hitch, a cow hitch, a lark's foot, whatever you want to call it. Now I can drop that over the end of a concrete stake, or a nail if I want to, swing an arc, measure a distance, it's not coming off. Now I've got to walk back and undo it, but with the Spencer logging tape, at least I don't have to wind it up when I'm going back. So automatic rewind reels, like on the Spencer tape, are a handy, handy thing. Here's another application from logging that works great in construction. Lumber crayon, keel, automatic key caddy rewinding tape, hook it on your suspenders, put it on your belt, put it on the pocket of your shirt, and your marker is right there all the time, and as a bonus, it'll hit you right in the chops if you don't watch out. Now you can pick up something that works kind of like this at a big box store, but you're going to be throwing it away, by about the end of the second day. So if you've got a logging supply, and you probably don't, I don't know where to send you, but you can probably find one online, and it just needs to be sort of a commercial duty. It doesn't have to go out very far because you've got a little extra line on the marker itself, and you're going to have it attached somewhere where you don't have to have miles and miles of slack. So the next one is just kind of similar to the last two, except for this. Plumb bobs have been around for a long time, right? And they always bring the same problem. What do you do with the string? I mean, how do you store that? And it's a problem. But the surveyors figure it out with a Gammon Reel. You may have seen a surveyor using one of these. They're everywhere in commercial concrete construction because you put that in your bags. You can drop the plumb bob where you need it. This one holds 8 or 10 feet of line, and it comes back. Look at this. Back in your bags. No muss, no fuss. So the next one is something I really like. Because about 30 years ago, I was setting some forms in Las Vegas. Maybe you've heard me tell this story, and it just struck me how dumb it is to carry a single jack with two identical faces when you're setting forms. Because half of setting forms is digging dirt. And so about 6 years ago, Brent Bailey made me that beautiful hammer. I can drive the stakes, I can break the rocks, I can dig the dirt, I can pry the boards off the wall. It's my form setter. I like it. In fact, I really like it, and I like it enough that I've had a whole bunch of them made, and I can sell you one if you want it. And I can tell you this, that these things cost money, and they're worth money. So anyhow, of all the things I'm talking to you about today in tool modifications, this one of putting a digging bit on the back of your form setting hammer, I think is the money shot. If I had to pick the one tool modification that I have used more, day in and day out, than any other one, and that has frankly given me the greatest satisfaction every time I use it, it's hardwiring a new cord 40 to 60 feet long straight into the handle of your Mag 77 and going to work. I have more than one video that shows exactly how this works and exactly why it is such a game changer. So the last three tool modifications that I've come up with that I think are worth mentioning relate to blacksmithing. So follow me over to the anvil and I'll show you what I've got figured out over there. Bolsters are a common tool that have a lot of applications, mostly and most consistently around either controlling what you do to the head of a bolt. So you can drop the hot piece into that bolster, or a pritchel hole, which is a bolster attached to your anvil. But you can drop it in there and square it up or round it up or whatever you want to do while the bottom is under control, right? So you can also punch into a bolster on a power hammer or on an anvil, and we have all different sizes. I mean, for like 3/8 rivets, you can put a header on in a 3/8 hole. For 1/4-inch rivets, you take a 1/4-inch bolster, you can put a head on it. You know, you can put the heads on lag bolts. There's lots of things you can do with bolsters. But you're continually trading tools and moving them around, and I was given a whole bunch of these years ago, and I love them, but I've got a solution. And I saw it on YouTube. I think Brian Brazil came up with this. I'm not sure, but it's so slick. Look at this. You make it to fit your anvil, and you put that pin on there that'll fit your pritchel hole, and you drill a series of holes on an arc that will always be over the top of your hardy hole. And what that does is, when you're drifting, you don't pull a whole bunch of material down into a bolster that's just too big for what you're doing. I can start with a 1/4, I can come up to there, and once it gets up to this and it drifts and falls through, I can switch to a bigger drift and drift it and move up to there and move over to here, and then boom, it falls through. And so you have a variety of bolster openings to accommodate whatever hole you're at, whatever stage in your drift you are. I think that this is just a really nice blacksmithing innovation. And if Brian Brazil's the guy that came up with it, kudos to Brian. You come up with a lot of stuff, and this has to be one of the really, really handy things that should be in every blacksmith shop. When I got this blacksmith gear in 2005, I was so blown away to own something as beautiful as this anvil. I began to worry about how to mount it. What would be a fitting way and place to mount this thing? And then I discovered that blacksmiths sometimes needed to make hold downs for holding work, hot work, onto the surface of the anvil. And, you know, being a firm believer that anything worth doing is worth overdoing, I came up with this design for this hold down, which I could have never done without Cy Swan's help, because it involves about 3 springs, a ratchet, mortise and tenon, rivet, several really fairly complex blacksmith processes that only Mr. Swan could have introduced me to on that day. Here's how it works. So here's the challenge. Maybe you're working on an animal head, you know, pretty delicate forging, a Darrell Nelson animal head rendering, or you're practicing, or I don't know what you're doing, but you've got to hold work pretty still. A hold down won't do it, you know, one of the drive-in gooseneck hold down things. And so this little dandy comes up like this. Swings over the top of the anvil. I hold out on that dog right there. I push down, and it's held. Look at that. It's held. Now it'll move around with a hammer blow, but it stays on the anvil. And then to release it, bam, it's down. I had to drill a hole back through the side of the stump and intercept the hole at the pivot on that thing, and I'll tell you this, Cy kind of laughed at me, or maybe more appropriately growled at me a little bit. He thought I was contaminating a beautiful anvil. But occasionally, I've had the opportunity to say, hey, Cy, throw that clamp down on that piece of iron, will you? And he growls, but we put it on, and it works pretty good. So we've come to the end of this video, or at least the end of the tools that I want to talk about that I've modified. And I hope that it has given you maybe some ideas or some incentive to modify a tool that you use or that you've thought about modifying. But the last one is this forge. I've got a video on this, one of the first videos we've made. It has performed better than I thought it would. It's big, it gets hot, I can replace the floor easily, and the video gives all those details. What that video doesn't tell you is that if you want to buy a ribbon burner, I can sell you one. Go to the website. But in any case, what I want you to think about is what modifications could you make on your tools? And more importantly, what shop skills do you need to add to your repertoire, your toolkit, the ability that you bring to the party? What skills do you need to add so you can make whatever modifications you need to make in the craft or the trade or the hobby or the interest that you have? Because they're all different and they're all the same. And if you have any suggestions or comments or ideas about tool modifications that we could all learn from, put them in the comments, because we read the comments and we learn from them, which is another modification that sometimes we need to make, being willing to learn from other people. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.